localwebradio.fm, your trusted voices on the Semiahmoo Peninsula.
Are you dealing with a health issue you would love to resolve? Would you like to restore yourself to be healthier and more invigorated? There is help. Welcome to the Natural Therapy Show with Dr. Tim Brown, architect and creator of Ocean Park Natural Therapies. Now, here's your host.
Eva Marienchild here, and yes, I am your host, and I am here with Dr. Tim Brown, chiropractor and ND, owner of Ocean Park Natural Therapies, and creator of Solving Your Health Puzzle with Integrated Medicine. Today, Dr. Brown will be continuing his discussion on a very important topic, hormonal health. Now, before Dr. Brown joins us, just a reminder that if you have questions or require assistance, you can reach his office at 604-538-3017 or visit the staff online at www.oceanparkhealth.com. Dr. Brown, welcome to the call.
Good day.
Good day.
Yes, it's a great day. So
yes, it is.
We're going to be talking, continuing on the hormonal talk and some things people can do or to better understand, what they can do to help themselves. But this is one area where it's highly recommended that you be working with a health practitioner who can assess these things and has access to proper measurements, because one of the potentials here, and this is why it becomes a regulated area, is when people self-prescribe. They try, if they think a little is good, then they do a lot. And in this case, too much is as much a problem as too little.
Right. So here we're going to be talking about the assessment and treatment and what people can do, and one of them is not to do over much to help their hormones.
Yes. So let's continue on, though, by talking a little bit about testosterone in men. Because
yes, if I could interrupt, I wanted you to, if you would be so kind, for those who didn't hear the last show, could you please do a recap of the last show? Perhaps you could spend just a few minutes talking about the big six hormones again and a brief explanation of why they're important.
Okay. Yes, the big six hormones, as we call them, are number one and or two, or one or one plus, are the thyroid and the adrenal hormones that are put out by the thyroid gland, help you with your temperature regulation, with all the functions in your body. It's basically when the thyroid's not functioning, you either feel like you're in a refrigerator, and or you're wanting to basically hibernate, and or be on siesta time all the time. With the adrenals, they're your get up and go. So when your get up and go is gone, and you can't seem to get yourself up, or when you get upright, you have problems, like even dizziness on standing, and blood sugar changes, and all those types of things. Upright function is dependent on good adrenal gland function. And then we have the reproductive hormones, which are estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. The three form kind of a triad that needs to be balanced. Little different proportions for women than for men. Significantly different is how we would put it. And then DHEA, which is the mother of the hormones, in that it can be shunted and adapted either to a stress pattern or to a rest and reproductive or repair function. So these are the key hormones that are most important in terms of the everyday patient person coming into the office.
Mm-hmm.
So
good. Yes.
Yeah. What we learned last time also was that estrogen for females is a potent hormone that tends to often be over-functioning in terms of the balance because it continues to be produced and introduced to the system through things like birth control pills and environmental things. But it continues on through into menopause, where progesterone can be significantly in decline through various reasons, and we learned that progesterone is a counterbalance hormone for estrogen. So it's one of the things of treating estrogen dominance is that we need to get progesterone levels increased. And then we also learned that testosterone was important for females because it was also declining quite significantly with pregnancies, with partial hysterectomies, things like that. And that when it declined, one of its key markers was depression and loss of libido. So the problem we're going to have when we start talking about testosterone in men and women, there's a significant difference, and testosterone has to do with repair and muscle function, but libido. So the joke is, that men have a very small brain and it's only focused on one thing, and we know that's generally has to do with sex. And for the female, when she's younger, she may have adequate levels, but those pregnancies, the aging things can get down to the point where she has a very low interest and a very low libido, but more significantly, she's going to have problems with repair and muscle function and a number of things that are significant.
Right, and then we also covered DHEA, right?
Yes, and DHEA, we saw that it declined, again, based on phases of function, but DHEA being the most abundant steroid in the body. When you measure that and it's very low, it means that the body's capacity to make these hormones is now very low. And we know that we need to try to bring the DHEA levels up, which are going to be a possibility then that the person can actually shunt and move these hormones into the proper pathways. But we're going to find that there's other things that interfere and cause problems that have to be addressed. And we mentioned that DHEA should be measured, and that in the U.S. particularly, people can basically purchase DHEA and take it, but we don't want to get it at too high of a level, and we don't want it shunting across, which we'll talk a little bit about, that it can shunt into estrogen versus testosterone. And so we'll discuss this a little bit in this session.
Good. Okay, thank you for that. How are the hormones evaluated and assessed, please?
Well, before we go to that, I just want to talk about the male, because I think so far when we talked about these things, it was mostly looking at the female.
Female, right. And
for the male, of course, the main hormones, besides the thyroid and the adrenal function, is testosterone and DHEA. And let's talk about testosterone for men, because we know that it gradually declines from about age 25. And as it decreases, and let's say significantly, the marker that I look for is around 40 years of age. If we think about most of the athletes, professional and otherwise, their peak years are somewhere in between their early to mid-20s to about 35. And, by about 38 years of age, an athlete is an old athlete, but still a young person, a young man in this case. And what happens is that the testosterone and some of these hormones are start to drop off. And this leads to a decreased quality of life. It leads to increased chances for heart disease and prostate cancer. But androgen deficiency, which is a defined disorder, and it's characterized by loss of libido, ED. I see it on television. That I've got, advertisements there for ED, which are erectile dysfunction. But they don't say that; they just call it ED now. Kind of hide it a bit. Depression, osteoporosis in men. So that's a weakening of the bone structures, decreased muscle mass, and strength. And for men, when there's a decrease of testosterone, they just don't feel well. They don't feel like they're themselves. And when these levels drop, they go to the doctors sometimes and complain, but mostly they complain to their wives. Or this is one of those things for men where they're get up and go, just got up and left.
And shut the door on the way out.
Yeah, and they're wondering what happened. It's kind of like the horse went out of the barn, and it's kind of gone. But there's one other thing we must mention here with men is that as they get older and these things are dropping off, when they have belly fat, when they start getting the big spread in the middle, that belly fat leads to something called increased aromatase. And aromatase is an enzyme that converts the DHEA to estrogen rather than testosterone. So the men with the big bellies and things are actually becoming more testosterone deficient and more estrogen dominant in their systems.
So did you want to touch on, thank you for that, did you want to touch on how the hormones are evaluated and assessed in your office? What do you do?
Yeah, I think what's important here is just to say that symptoms are the most important factor in determining the need for treatment. So, for instance, with testosterone replacement, if it's considered, if the symptoms and then corroborating blood or lab work support the diagnosis. And the same goes with these other things. So when we try to evaluate, we first list and listen to the symptoms. There's various questionnaires and things like that of course can, let's say the person comes in and they're just depressed and they've got weight gain and no energy. Well, this can be coming from a lot of things. But if the symptoms, when you're trained to look at these things and you try to look at what's underlying this, then you start searching for things. And one of the first things we're going to look for are where are the hormones at. And after we have a good symptom survey, a history, we'll often recommend lab testing. And we can start with something simple like a saliva test, which gives us a snapshot of where the system is at currently, and from that we can start profiling. We can also, if a person's on hormones, saliva testing is a little trickier, and it may show what you've taken today, but it doesn't necessarily show what's circulating in the system. So blood tests are often a better thing to test there. And remembering that hormones are released into the bloodstream and they affect target organs. So that gives us a profiling of what's likely going on. But then one can also consider urinary test, because the metabolites or the breakdown of these hormones and what's being released can be seen with a urinary hormonal test, and that can tell us which way the pathways are working, whether you're creating too much, as say DHA is converting into estrogen, or is it going to the testosterone pathway, because you see these metabolites or waste products from the different pathways showing up.
Great. So, did you also measure the any biochemical indicators?
Well, okay, I'm going to talk about that in terms of from clinical findings and observations. When it comes to biochemical individuality, the problem with interpreting these things is finding whether they're actually working down at the mitochondrial level, down in the cells. And we can't always tell that from the lab tests. So what we try to do is find the right fit. So in our clinic, we use autonomic response testing, using biomarkers and things to help us determine whether something is an appropriate fit for the individual. For instance, if I use some of these biomarkers and I challenge their hormones, and I find that if I put hormonal markers in for estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, and the person weakens and reacts on all of these, weakening, I know that if I put these substances in, they likely can't use them. And what happens is their receptors are not programmed properly, and they're rejecting the hormones even if they needed them. So what we have to do then is we have to clean the system off. We have to fix the receptors so that they can regulate properly. And the regulation is kind of like your thermostat, for instance, on the wall, where you set the temperature for the furnace. But if that becomes jammed or gets corrosion and things, gunk on it, then what happens is it now doesn't set the temperature properly, and it gets stuck on either the furnace is going on too much or it doesn't turn on at the right time. And using these challenges, we can help determine the right sort of levels and the right sort of sequencing of how we should treat things.
Great. So I'm sure that if something doesn't match, you just don't prescribe. You'd rather leave things alone.
Right. And this is why we sometimes find, for instance, like a person will be on a thyroid medication, a Synthroid, and they're constantly showing an indicator of still a low thyroid function. And what typically would happen is the doctor would just continue to increase the level of that prescription. But the problem might be that, for instance, with the Synthroid, it doesn't have adequate T3, which is one of the, on the tissue level, T3 is needed for the tissues to kind of turn on, and we need about a 4-to-1 ratio between a T4 and a T3. And so we might either give a compounded form of T3, or we might switch the person over to a desiccated thyroid, which has some T4 and T3 naturally occurring within it. And then we find that the person's symptoms for thyroid and muscle metabolism and weight gain and all of these things changes, and they just feel better.
Terrific. And they don't need drugs for that.
Well, yeah, sometimes it's a combination. What we're really talking about is the old tried and true things from the past, balanced now with what we know from modern technology and modern science, that we have to have a blend of the old and the new. Because in the old days, the levels of stressors and things that we were under, I think were not so constant. You were if you were in a long-term war zone, but let's say in North America, we're generally not in war zones. And what happens now is that from an early age. We watch the young people now, the amount of stress and strain they're under, the population density, the stuff on the internet. I mean, we're basically it's go, go, go.
Constant, right.
Mm-hmm. And the body was not designed to do that.
No.
If you want to maybe live like Alexander the Great, who decided he probably was only maybe going to live till 30, so he'd conquer the world. You can do that, but the problem is around 30, 35, maybe 40, you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
We're dealing with now the average age is going to be going to about 85, and so you've got about 45 years of suffering if you don't deal with these things
early on. Right.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks for that terrific information. I am Eva Marienchild with Dr. Tim Brown, and after the break we will talk more about what people can do to help their hormones. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
More natural therapies with Dr. Tim Brown after these short messages.
Hillcrest Bakery in Delhi presents Old Time Radio on the specialty channel on localwebradio.fm. Hillcrest Bakery in Delhi, serving the Semi-Ammu Peninsula for over 40 years with custom cakes, deli platters, and a wide selection of fresh-baked breads. Hillcrest Bakery in Delhi on the corner of Thrift and Johnston, where everything is lovingly made from scratch. Call Hillcrest Bakery in Delhi today at 604-531-1750. That's 604-531-1750. And visit them online at hillcrestbakeryanddelhi.ca.
If you're struggling with a dental or oral health issue, be sure to catch the Healthy Smiles Oral Health Show with Dr. Norm Ickert on the Health Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Shopping for the lowest mortgage rate? Looking to refinance?
Catch the Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer
on the Business Channel
on localwebradio.fm.
It's time now for more Natural Therapies with Dr. Tim Brown.
All right, we're back with Dr. Tim Brown. Dr. Brown, what can people do to help their hormones?
Well, besides some lifestyle things, which we'll go to a little bit later, right now I'm going to say that what they need to do is get assessment. It's important to find out what's out of balance. So you got to know which one of these things and what the balance is between them, because it's kind of a bit like not really a teeter-totter, although teeter-totter, the body usually balances two things against each other, like estrogen and progesterone, or within the thyroid, T4 and T3 have to balance out that type of thing. But often it's more like one of those hanging mobiles, where when you put weight on one area, the whole thing kind of shifts a bit. So you have to learn how to balance it so you don't create something that is totally skewed. And in order to do that, we have to look at a good history and questionnaire to correlate your symptoms. We need a little bit of lab testing or clinical assessment and some follow-up measurements. And then what we like to do in our clinic is we do a nutrient endocrine assessment using autonomic response testing. So we look at your diet to see what you would be putting in your body on a regular basis, and then we assess whether the body is low or deficient in things, whether it's got a toxicity from too much of something, and we also check the structural factors so that the nervous system and structures are properly communicating on different levels, so that we can help you decide, whether to take something out, put something in, and what form. So these are the important things: is getting an assessment and then reassessing at certain points along the scale. As you put something in, you want to see in a number of weeks or so, how are you doing? Are you getting better with it? As the body needing something else to complete the process? So there has to be some ongoing kind of reassessment.
And the treatments could include?
Well, it could include bioidentical hormones, which we'll talk a little bit about the rationale. But for instance, with the thyroid, it might be getting that T4 and T3 balance with a desiccated or compounded thyroid. With the adrenals, we might need appropriate nutrient and hormonal support until the glands can rebuild their reserves. So that can include also giving proper forms of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone to balance their ratios, which we kind of talked about why that's important. And then the basis is diet, exercise, and proper nutrients to replace deficiencies. So diet and exercise are, which we'll go into with the anti-aging, but after 40, you have to change your diet. There's no doubt that you cannot eat like you did when you were young because of the changes. You must get exercise because otherwise the calories and the things just accumulate in your system. And it's like your house filling up with all your possessions and purchases and garbage and things. There has to be a recycling and a constant moving things out. And so those are the important things. And then we have to reduce the levels of stress because we just can't handle things the way we did when we were 21, 22 years of age.
I know people are wondering, how do I have to eat differently now that I'm 40? Can you give them a quick rundown? Just basically, do you mean
it's going to be
the basic pyramid?
Reduction. Well, for most people, it's simply that you cannot burn the carbs the way you did earlier. And for some people, they haven't been able to burn them most of their life, and they've had weight issues ongoing because they're not good fat burners. I'm a fat burner, so when I'm at rest, I'm burning fat, and the testing kind of shows that. But the main thing is I'm still fairly lean, and I'm in my early 60s. But people who have weight problems have carbohydrate intolerance, and some of them have figured it out, and they've tried to cut down, but that's going to be a big one. The other thing that we're finding is more and more young people, and it's really a family issue, is that they don't know how to eat properly to get the nutrients into their system.
You mean chew?
I mean, the food selection is the first thing.
That's right.
Things with the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the enzymes, and things come from living plants and living foods. They don't come from synthetic, man-made, plasticized, denatured so that they don't go bad foods. So that goes in our talk last time about the proper components to build the system. We could say patent medicines or man-made medicines often are a problem, but man-made foods are also a problem.
Sure. Who wants to eat something that is rock hard or that still looks the same as it did 7 years ago when you're storing it on your shelf.
Right.
Wow.
I call those robber foods.
You call them what now? Rubber
foods.
Right.
The foods that you take in that don't have the nutrients and things have to steal them from your system because they don't have essential fatty acids, essential nutrients, amino acids, etc. So they steal them from your reserve system in order for you to utilize them. And they leave their waste products, the plastics and the chemical garbage in your tissues, and they accumulate over time. So you need policeman foods that will protect you and look after your well-being. And that's how I train or talk to the kids, train their parents about changing their diet.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Policeman foods.
Yes.
Or policewomen foods.
Policemen or women, yes.
Yeah,
but
police persons.
You have to look after them. If you don't take care of those kinds of foods, because those are things that as you said, they will deteriorate and change because they're a natural food product. And the other ones, will sit there for years and not change. But in our modern life, when we transport foods and things, we put preservatives and chemicals and things, and so things will last a long time. But unfortunately, they petrify and do things in our bodies.
In your body, right?
Harden our tissues and
you're right,
and stop our function.
Right. You recommended last show that people obtain certain books. Could you go over that again?
Yes. 2 books. One is Discovering Your True Balance with Bioidentical Hormones by Dr. Ron Brown of mytruebalance.ca. And the other is called Bursting with Energy by Dr. Frank Schallenberger. And I think you can obtain that at antiagingmedicine.com for more detailed information on the topics of why hormone balancing is important for your health. And Bursting with Energy talks about my passion, which is mitochondrial function and maintaining optimal energy levels throughout your whole lifetime.
Good. Well worth skimming through, if not reading in depth. So do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yes. I would like to say that identifying and balancing these big 6 hormonal profile for an individual is actually about maintaining an optimal health profile. What is important is that we're not trying to maintain levels at a 20-year-old level, but more for age-appropriate phase of your life, and it's measured for optimal age related to levels that are closer to your optimal at 40, 50, or 60 years old. So in order to protect your, the reason you want to use bioidentical hormones is that they protect your tissue integrity, which is your ability to heal, to repair, and to have a feeling and state of well-being throughout all the stages of your life. When these things drop off, you just don't feel well. You know something's wrong, but you can't pinpoint it. And typically, these things are not treated appropriately, and we have a lot of people suffering needlessly.
Absolutely. Dr. Brown, thank you so much for this informative look into how hormones affect our bodies and how to treat them. I look forward to speaking with you again next week, where we will be discussing anti-aging medicine.
Thank you.
If you, the audience, well, you're welcome. If you, the audience, can think of someone who might benefit from what we've talked about today, please go ahead and share this podcast with them. I'm sure they'll thank you for it. You can reach Dr. Timothy Brown by telephone at 604-538-3017 or visit the staff online at www.oceanparkhealth.com. Dr. Brown, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Natural Therapy Show with Dr. Tim Brown, architect and creator of Ocean Park Natural Therapies. If you feel that you are a few steps farther down the health ladder than you should be, the naturopathic doctors at Ocean Park Natural Therapies want you to know that you can be helped. For more information and to book your appointment, call 604-538-3017. That's 604-538-3017. And visit them online at www.oceanparkhealth.com.
On your computer, on your smartphone, on your Wi-Fi radio. We're localwebradio.fm.
This episode is a production of Jam Media. For information on hosting your own web radio show, visit jammedia.com. That's www.jambmedia.com.
The opinions expressed by our guest and host on localwebradio.fm do not necessarily reflect the views of Jam Media or its owners. No expressed or implied opinions of any product or service should be considered an endorsement or recommendation of any kind by Jam Media or its owners.